Okay, welcome to RES. Welcome to RES 333, Module 6, Teams meeting. It's hard to believe. We only have a week and a half left of this semester, and you guys are rapidly approaching these final courses. You guys have made me really proud. You have a really good cohort. Hopefully you've been able to see my responses to your papers and to your activity assignments, your papers, the quizzes. Some of y'all have taken some of the FEMA courses. Hopefully you found those helpful. Today, got a PowerPoint to show you, and I'm going to actually share that with you. It's going to go over the objectives for today. And if you're watching the video, what I need you to do is to just write a summary, answer some of the questions, write it up as a Word document and submit it and turn it in. If you have any difficulties with that, please let me know. Before I start the presentation, I do want to say that I appreciate your patience with some of the grading. It should be almost all caught up except for last week, and I'll be working on that today and tomorrow. Been very impressed. When I do give students the option of either doing the activity quiz or the activity paper, I have to still list both of the assignments. So I have to go back in. Sometimes the Wolf Den grading system, if you don't submit an assignment, say you chose to do the FEMA quiz and you didn't do the activity paper, then it's going to assign an F, a 0. Do not panic by that. I will take those away. You're not responsible for that. Again, look at news and announcements. That's where you're going to get the majority of the information of what you need to do for the week. And of course, it should be laid out in Wolf Den into the course outline for that week and also in the syllabus. But I did want to just clarify that. I think I caught most of them. If you did do a activity paper and you didn't choose the quiz and it says still open, you don't need to do the quiz. If you want to, feel free, but you don't need to. I will tell you that you need to have at least one in each of the categories. So you can't, if I give you options, you can't always choose to do activity papers and not do a quiz, or choose to do only quizzes and not do an activity paper, because what'll end up happening is you'll lose the points for that particular section of your grade. So I don't believe that's going to happen in this cohort, but I definitely wanted to make you aware of that. In saying that, I am going to go and share my screen, and we're going to start the PowerPoint for today, and we are already recording. So I am going to now switch to the Teams here. Okay, can you all see Module 6 Teams?
Yes.
All right, great. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. The objectives for today for Module 6 is we're going to be looking at being appropriately prepared. And all of this disaster preparedness, the FEMA courses, and what we've been doing up to this point has been trying to get you a mindset of preparedness is the importance of being prepared, and to think about the future and think about it in respect to the community that you serve. And your community you serve can be very small, your respiratory department, your shift. It could be the patients that you serve on that shift. it could be a hospital, it could be the greater community, a region, like I'm in the PD region, it could be South Carolina, it could be the Southeast. So really, depending on your role, your leadership role, the value of being appropriately prepared cannot be understated. In a home, you want to be able to have some emergency resources on hand. What if the power goes out? What if you lose running water? Things like that. You talk about having the disaster preparedness kits in your home. We know in South Carolina, if you're watching from us, and being prepared for during hurricane season, because we can be without power for several days, or running water. Now, I mean, Madison, I saw you jump on, being on the West Coast. Look at the fires, the wildfires, and the air quality issues that accompany that area. The water rationing for certain parts of California. Those things are going to happen, and we need to be appropriately prepared. But I want us to specifically talk today about the staffing in the RT department, surge capacity, and the role of leadership and management, and then talk about the final course project. So, staffing in the RT department. What are your experiences? I mean, I come with several experiences from several different areas over my lifetime. I'm definitely in the latter parts of my career. I don't believe I'm over. I'm starting to get an inkling to want to do, getting excited about doing some more things. And but I know from being a staff therapist, being a student, being a staff therapist, being a shift leader, a lead therapist, being an assistant director and a director, and then I was over 5 different departments. I remember being a different, a program director for a respiratory care program, being married for 32 years, a father of 5, that brings a certain level of leadership. And, sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't. But in all of those roles, I had a responsibility of being prepared. From being a student, being prepared for my class. Did I read the assignments? And you guys are freaking awesome with that. I'm letting you know, you guys have a great group. What a phenomenal group of students when it comes to being prepared, reading the assignments, and engaging in conversations. That makes the class better. That makes me want to do a better job, the instructor. When people are all doing what they're supposed to do, it raises the bar. And you know that in your departments. You know that it just takes one person to start to change the culture in the department. And that's what a leader does. And we're going to be talking about that. But, being properly prepared in the RT department, staffing. Now, I know that for those who are watching the video, this is one of those questions that I would want you to answer. But for those here right now, how is staffing determined in your RT departments? Brooke, you were the first one to sign on, then Holly, then Madison. So why don't we go in that order if possible?
Do you mean like staffing during a disaster or everyday staffing?
Just everyday staffing.
So we have it's called a SMT sheet. It helps us, it has certain procedures that we do, and it gives us an allotted amount of points. And then the charges will put in all the counts. So like how many vents you have, how many nitrics you have, how many treatments, how many so-and-so, whatever, for all the procedures or treatments that you're going to do or things you're going to have to monitor. And then it divides it up so that the goal is for us to have a count of 38 to 42 per person. But with COVID and like the surge, it's normally higher than that right now.
Yeah, just your
So
normal. And you said SMT. What does SMT stand for?
staffing management tool.
Okay. And so your normal staffing, when I meant, and I'll qualify this, what is your day shift staffing for your respiratory department and your night shift? And then what is it on the weekend?
So they try to make it be the same for every day, whether it's a weekend or a weekday. The goal for day shift is normally, because we have a couple 8-hour shift people, the goal is like 10 to 9, and night shift is what it's supposed to be, from what I understand, is like 9 to 8, but that's a goal that we've not been able to achieve due to our staffing issues.
The staffing issues are everywhere. You're not alone. Um, but that's exactly what I'm looking for. Holly?
We use a report that we run off of Epic that calculates the amount of minutes. So, depending on what the task is, everything gets a certain amount of minutes. And I think they the ARC guidelines for it, but like the ventilator is so many minutes, nitric is so many minutes, and so on. The goal is to, on a normal day, have around 600 minutes within your 12-hour shift. So typically on days in a normal 11 to 12 on day shift. Nights is usually around 9, and it's the same for the weekends.
Okay. And you were saying it's based on a certain amount of minutes that's allotted for a particular therapy or treatment or something that's some kind of a therapeutic nature. We use something with respiratory value units, RVUs, and each thing was given, like a breathing treatment would be 15 minutes, and a vent check was supposed to be, I think it was 10 minutes, but if it was a vent setup, it was more. And I think that, Brooke, that's something similar to what you were saying, correct?
Yeah, like our for instance, our vents or like our treatments are worth 1.34 or 1.13 or whatever per treatment. But that's all that the number that we get, that's the value, equals a time increment somehow through all the things.
No, and that's trying these staffing units and management concepts. There's a purpose behind it. We're going to talk about that in a second, but we have Madison, who's going to bring a very unique perspective too, because I was kind of blown away by some of your posts. I mean, all three of y'all, seriously. And for those who are watching the videos, but Madison works at a long-term care facility where some of her patients have been on a ventilator for over a year. Madison, what's your staffing pattern at your facility?
Well, at my facility, in my unit, there's only one RT on duty.
For how many beds?
Oh, let's see. I'm trying to. We have potential for, I think, let's see, there's 8. Hold on. I think there can be like around 30 beds in our hospital, but right now it's only 16 of those are filled because we got crab, so
well,
we can't get any more patients.
You've been approved for 30 beds.
Around 30. I think I'm just doing a little math in my head, but
okay, so we'll say 30. Well, 25. Right. We'll go with a lower number. Can all 25 of those beds be a ventilator patient or a trach patient?
Well, they're all trach patients, but yeah.
So in essence, you can be caring for 25 vented trach patients.
Right.
Well, one therapist.
Yep. I think somebody mentioned that if we get above 15, they may get another one, but it's incredibly unlikely. I mean, really, we're super short-staffed.
It's all right that you're in California. We're on the East Coast here. It's the same all the way across, even in the middle, going north, going south. It's the same.
Oh, it's
Okay.
bad. It's because I mean there is only one person on duty, so it's
And go ahead.
like there's two people on night shift, two people on day shift, and it's kind of like how it was like when I was working at a restaurant where somebody, if you want to call out, somebody has to cover for you. So yeah, it can get pretty rough at times because say somebody on day shift is like, oh, I'm going on vacation, I'm leaving, what you gonna do? And all the shifts have to be filled.
And
Or-
those are concerns at all the facilities, and you go back to our RES 310 class when we talked about, and we're going to mention that again, leadership and some of the struggles. If you've ever been responsible for creating a staff schedule, that, pardon my French, sucks. Holly, Brooke, do you guys have to do scheduling?
I think we do not. Our TSLs do these schedules.
Okay. How about you, Holly? For me, it was a nightmare. And especially depending on the departments. Some departments that I was over, they did self-scheduling. Other departments, you had to put your request in for time off. The respiratory department I worked at, we had anywhere from 12 to 14 therapists on day shift. And on night shift, it was 10 or 11. And it was always a struggle. We always had an on-call person that if somebody did call out, we had the opportunity to call somebody in. But for the, I think, 6 or 7 years that I was a respiratory assistant director, we never, the code was you didn't call anybody in unless it was a disaster. You made do with what you had because no one wanted to be called in, because when you came into your shift, you worked like crazy. And then you have the LTAC perspective of being the only one on the shift. And, Madison mentioned right now 15 patients or 16 patients, and there's possibly another 15 beds open. Those facilities make money by getting patients in the beds. And so how much time does it take to actually set up a new patient arrival? And then what happens if you have 10 or 12 patients right now you're caring for and you have 4 new admits? How much time does that take, Madison?
What was that again? How much does what take?
How much time does it take when you have, what's the difference between having a patient who's already in the bed, they're already on their ventilator, their trach, they're on the vent, they're established, they're in a routine. How much time, what's the difference between that type of patient and one that is a new admit? They're just coming in, they're new to your department, new to your floor.
It can take a while because, we have to put in kind of like, we have to give them like, full assessments, make sure, like, see what kind of equipment they're on, like what, all our patients are trached usually. So they have to see what kind of trach they're on, if we have the supplies for that trach, like, new inner cannulas, make recommendations to the doctor, get them all set up. So that can definitely take a while. Plus, on top of our load, since there is only one RT, and, it's not like nurses suction or anything. So, it can be really hard because you have patients over there yelling at you to suction and, somebody's vent alarming. You're just trying to run around and get everything done at once.
So, I mean, it changes at a moment's notice. And, for Brooke and Holly and the others who are not working in an LTAC, and even in an LTAC, what happens when a patient codes or you have a rapid response? You know,
Yeah.
what was that? Go ahead.
Um, typically, actually, it's funny. We actually, if somebody is coding, we have to actually call 911 and get into a bigger hospital. But we do like the CPR, the bagging them and stuff like that. But I just thought it was, it's a little bit different for me because I was used to doing my clinicals at the hospital. It's like, all right, where's the supplies? And like, no, you call 911.
And it's hard, but you still have to be there. You have to make the initial start and to help. And then in the hospital, wherever you're working, those new developments in the hospital are all part of being appropriately prepared. Brooke and Holly, and to those watching, every day you come into the hospital, is it always the same number of ventilators? Probably now with COVID, you guys are all maxed out. But when you think back, it changes. There's an ebb and flow. Do you have new start treatments or new patients being admitted? What happens? Is there certain times of the week, the day, or the month where you can expect the emergency department to be busier than other times? Are there times of the year? Is it seasonal? And we're going to be talking about that. And it's tying into this concept of what does it mean to be appropriately prepared, and what does it mean with in relation to surge capacity? So we've been talking about the RT staffing plans, and you've given me some of your personal experiences. But now, as we've discussed that, okay, what are some of the potential criteria that you should be considering if you are the person who's responsible for the decision making for this is how our department will be staffed? So I'm going to open that up to the floor. What criteria should be considered? What do you think, Brooke or Holly?
There's a lot of times that our ER itself is pretty large, and a lot of times we have to consider a person that would be a backup ER person if the one designated to the ER has two at the same time that are being placed on the vent. Same with the nursery, it's typically one person, but if there's one baby that's being resuscitated and another C-section is happening. So we always have to consider the other options of who can be a backup when things like that happen. As far as surge capacity, do you want me to go into that or just?
Oh, before we even get to the surge capacity, you mentioned even like the neonatal. What about your transport staff for your neonatal and pediatric? I know for me, when I was over children's, we had our neonatal transport staff, in which it was a respiratory therapist and a nurse that went out. And then the same thing with pediatrics. And we didn't call people in. That was from the staffing that we had in-house. How do y'all handle that at your facility?
We're lucky in that aspect because we call the transport team that's at the Children's Hospital at Richland. So they come and pick up the kids that are being transported.
So you have dedicated staff because guess what's going to happen? It's going to be needed. When is it going to be needed? You don't know, but you know that that's a service that's going to be needed. You said about surge. You mentioned surge, and each day, we've been using this word surge, and I wonder if, as you can see, the fourth highlighted said personal experience during the pandemic. We associate this surge with the pandemic, this surge of patients, and how are we going to handle this? But it's my experience that respiratory has been doing this forever. Okay. Every day I came into as a staff therapist, you know, we were assigned a particular unit or floor, or there was some mechanism that was used at the time. And as a new therapist, I might not have been able to use all the proper vernacular, but they had some rhyme or reason for why they did what they did. And as I became more experienced, I learned that each of the procedures, each of the therapies that we were doing were awarded some kind of a value unit. But it seemed like there was always not enough staff and we had too much work. Do y'all feel that way?
Always.
Always. Okay. Why do you say always? Because you guess what? We have not always had the pandemic.
I think it's just because of the unknown and how it can change so quickly, of having to have that backup person that can drop what they're doing and go to the ER, drop what they're doing and go to the nursery. It can always change so quickly in our field that I feel, and I'm sure we all do feel, understaffed. We had intensive in our MICU before the COVID pandemic happened. They wanted us to change staffing. There was only taking care of one side of the ICU. So one RT would be on one side and one other RT would be on the other side to be able to take quality care of our patients, which we didn't get to pursue very far, but I appreciate their thought process with that.
That's awesome. And, you know, I love that you threw the word out there, quality care, and defining what quality care really is, you know, and that'll tie into that last part, the personal experiences during the pandemic, because we redefine what quality care is in so many different things, so many things that we have found ourselves doing during this pandemic that we would have never dreamed of doing, that we would have written people up for doing, that we're doing now, that now is become an accepted practice. But I wanted to just kind of share that, you know, from my 30 years in respiratory, it's always been a shortage. I mean, unless I worked at a facility that was a very rural, small community, little hospital, one RT, very few patients coming in. You always had plenty of time to do your treatments and your vent checks, and you actually ended up spending a lot of time in the respiratory department watching television or something like that. I apologize. I forgot. I have my bird here in my office here at home. It's a green cheek conure, so she kind of chirps every once in a while, so I apologize. But the staffing, you know, the potential for change is so great at any given time. And respiratory, and Holly, you alluded to it with the AARC practice, you know, I've been hoping and wishing that the AARC will come out with published standards saying this is, you know, kind of like a nursing standard. You know, if a patient, you know, how many patients can a nurse take in an ICU? You know, is it 1-to-1 or 2-to-1? You're not going to see 6-to-1 or 10-to-1. You know, they have these guidelines that are not only published and supported, but they're supported by DHEC and HCFA, and they are out there. And for respiratory, if you have one person, like we're looking like Madison, she has 15 patients and maybe she has a good day that day. But then next week, she's still the one person on the shift, and now she has 20. And then the next week, she has 25, one person. You know, respiratory has had this, I don't know if it's an ability, it's just something that we have done, and that is we rise to the occasion. We get it done. You know, we want to make sure our patients get the treatments that they need. And then, as Holly, you use that word quality. What is quality? Is quality really being met? Are we achieving the quality goals that we want, the patient care outcomes that we are really desiring for our patients? And this comes into those decision-making principles. I can remember back, and this is now about 20 years ago, with the RVUs, we had all the treatments. Each RVU was 1 minute at a time. And if you came in for a 12-hour shift, you had 720 RVUs. Well, that's the whole day. I mean, if you walked out of the department with 720 RVUs, you probably picked up stuff. So you were doing more work. But we always had to turn in these productivity reports at the end of the day. How productive were we? Okay. And I used to find it very funny to hear, and this might be telltale, a little bit about myself. Not that I was making fun of anybody, but I thought it was very weird, very odd when I would hear people say, man, I was 125% productive today. How can you be more than 100% productive? And I would say it in a nice joking way. You must have given crappy care, because you had to cut corners. And then as a leader, if those corners could be cut, why don't we cut them on a regular basis? Why are those even there in the first place? Or if they need to be there, why didn't we just find a way to miss some therapy? You know, if you're a manager in the department and you have to do a budget, has anybody here had to have to present a budget to your VP or the CFO? Anybody here have to do that? Because I know for me, the very first time I had all budgeted number of employees and I had vacancies. And, you know, I would do everything in our power to make sure that, you know, my staff members were trying to be motivated and we were meeting the need. And as a leader, you jump out there and you're doing work. And then when it came to budget time, I budgeted those open vacancies in there. And the CFO cut them right out. I'm like, no, we need them. We have to have them. We have to be able to have those people here. And their response to me was, did you get the work done? Yeah. Then you don't need them. So I'm kind of sharing that thought for you to be thinking, because you are the future leaders, thinking about the staffing plans. How do they change? What impacts the staffing plans have? And then, you know, when we talk about the surge, we've been dealing with that on a regular basis, but the pandemic has presented with us a completely different view. Now, respiratory, it's been real hard, because why? We've always just met the goal for the day, and it changes. And you think about how our previous actions have at times put us in the position that we are in now. So my last question here before I move on, looking at the personal experiences during the pandemic, essential employees, or RTs, are they considered essential employees? Yes. You know, what are some of those alternative work schedules that can be thought of? What are some of the flexible alternative work sites where you can be shared from one facility to the next if you're part of a larger group of hospitals? You know, is there transportation assistance and services? Are you using temporary staffing? What kind of training is necessary? You know, and then talking about the mental well-being of your staff members during the pandemic. So what were some of your experiences with staffing during this pandemic?
So we were short-staffed. We hired travelers, and then as one tower. So I work at MUSC downtown. Downtown is made up of 3 different towers: Sean Jenkins, Ashley River Tower, and Main Hospital. Each tower is in charge of their own staffing levels or whatever. At Main Hospital, say we were desperate and we really needed somebody, and at Ashley River Tower, say that they were going to be okay. Like they were okay. They were like adequately staffed. They would float from Ashley River Tower over to Main Hospital, so then we both were equally as busy to try to make all the numbers look better and share across all 3 towers. So like peds therapists could have to come work on the adult side. As an adult therapist, I have been expected to go work over at the ped side, all due to like who's in the most desperate need.
Right.
Or whatever. And then on top of that, we had the travelers, and then we have overtime with incentive and all this other stuff. So that we've all been trying to do that, along with we hired an ungodly amount of new grads to help buff up our staff a little bit.
And everything you've said is all those decisions that are excellent decisions to do. Excellent movement to help meet the surge, of where our patients are, how many patients we have, and adding, like you said, getting a bunch of the new grads who can come in, people who might not be able to go to the units, but they can definitely help on the floors, help with assist other staff members who have more experience, because that all helps with the overall morale in the departments, the mental health and well-being of the department. And I just wanted you to, as a group, to be thinking of, the surge and how respiratory has always handled the surge. But what happens when we're in a situation like the pandemic, and does it require us to rethink some of the things that we consider necessary, or this is how we do our procedures, this is how we do this is what's needed for quality, and evidence-based medicine's out there, and the research is out there. We just need to tap into it. And for those here today and those who are watching the video, you all are a resource for each other. That's why I like getting you to share input, because when we have people from MUSC, and then we have people from Prisma Health, maybe in the Lexington area or upstate or in California or wherever, the PD region, we can share ideas, and then we can learn from one another. And then hopefully we can also start to develop these ideas and relate them to your chosen course project, your final course project that we talked about in RES 310, your capstone project. How could this be associated to your final course project? We'll address that more, but the staffing plans as an RT all should have enough flexibility that we're not always maxed out, that we have a certain number of therapists and they're going to be at 100% productivity every day. We need to start hiring and thinking about what is the level that the hospital should expect from an RT. When you look at the units, the ICUs, they normally run, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if anybody, correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody else knows, but they normally try to make sure that the ICUs, such as especially like the surgical ICUs, are at about 80%. Because there's a productivity point. If they don't have patients, they're not making money, you can't afford the staff. So there's a point where that productivity level, that percentage has to be at. But then maybe that's what it should be for respiratory therapists and for medical staff, that we staff according to the hospital, and we only need to be 80% productive, because then it gives us that other 20% during a surge. It's just an idea.
We have to run at 97% to 104 or 5% productivity at my facility.
For respiratory.
Yeah, that's the goal. The goal for respiratory is to have a productivity percentage of 97, 98, something like that. I don't remember, to 105.
Let's see, now 105 is definitely better than the example I said of 120, 125%. Because,
well, right now productivity is 150.
now think about that. What does that say? Without being derogative or anything, how does that affect, and this you don't have to share back with me, this is, just for you to think about. How does that affect quality? The care that we're giving.
I can say that if, like, the last 2 days I worked, I was in there, I was in MICU, and I had 12 ventilators, 2 high flows, and an around the clock BiPAP in a slew of treatments. When I first started in 2016 at MUSC, that assignment would have justified 2.5 RTs. I was in there by myself.
And you are the future leaders. Okay? You're the future leaders. That's why I want to get into the next section, because we have to do what we need to do, but there has to be a point where we stop and we think. And when you're constantly running like crazy, it's hard. Not only are you responsible for staffing, but supplies. How many supplies? What do you need for your shift? What do you need for the full day? What do you need for a week? Monthly? What are the seasonal responsibility for supplies? Yearly? The supplies that you need during the from October to March is going to be different than what we normally needed during June through August. I mean, typically, okay? Thinking about how, to be properly prepared. What would be a respiratory therapist's proper budget for supplies? Well, you need to know what you need on the daily basis. How do you know what you need on a daily basis? You got to be able to get that information from your staff, and then I want you to be thinking about the possible criteria that should be used in decision-making process for that department plan for supplies. Because if you don't have enough supplies, it makes your job hard. Just think about the pandemic when you didn't have enough ventilators, you didn't have enough PPEs. You got enough staff, but you don't have enough supplies. Now what? So they tie together. And then we talk about the surge capacity, and we talk about what were your experiences during that pandemic, and you've been sharing that, what you did and how your facility, and some of the comments that I've read talking about being so frustrated because it seemed like the plan changed every single day. Leaders were coming down, and the plan that yesterday's plan was no longer today's plan, and they had to make changes. Anybody experience something like that during the surge capacity? How were your leaders responding to you? How was it affecting your daily work?
Initially, in the first wave, we had daily meetings that we called, like, you didn't have to call into all of them, you had to call into 50% of them. And they were at, I don't know, I think they were at 10 o'clock. It was like after they had the big morning meeting, and they would talk about what our COVID numbers were, how we were on supplies, what we were going to do, which COVID unit was opening next, what floor was a COVID, like the whole floor was COVID positive, like which floors were going to open and do that, and like that kind of stuff. And that was only for the first surge we did that. And then it was too much because we were drowning in it. You were drowning in it on your days off because you call into these daily meetings that were 30 minutes, and then you'd go to work and it'd be the same. It'd just be more stuff, but a different plan every day.
Yep. And what you're describing is some of the same things that I've heard from different students from different areas. And what can we learn from the first surge? What can we learn from this second surge? And then taking that information, moving forward, how can we apply that to what we consider quality care, quality staffing, quality, making sure that we have the right supplies at the right times for our patients. And that's all going to be taking, proper leadership. But it takes you, okay, as the future leader, with this knowledge that you've been getting, to put it all together, okay, to remember that that surge capacity is an organized process of specific criteria and concrete actions to maximize the capacity and care. I know you all are doing that. And then how do you respond to that appropriately? Okay, to those high surge census and those surge alert points. Okay, and then your facilities, do you all use anything similar here? Where 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, where when you get to a certain point in your department, then you need to have your leadership come together, and you'll have to have optimal communication, optimal coordination of care, okay? And then you need to be having somebody watching quality and then seeing what can be done and what do we need to do differently. As for leadership and management, that's you again. What is the role of management in these situations? What is the role of the leaders? Remember back the 12 different types of leadership styles that we talked about? Do you remember some of the ones that you chose? Does anybody remember the leadership style that they thought that they liked the most? One of the most frequent was the democratic. And then there was few that liked the coaching or the team. I would ask you today, with the experience that you've had during this pandemic, what leadership styles are needed? Are there times when you need to have an autocratic? You know what? We just have to have somebody come in. You got to come in. Okay? Is it more facilitative? Do you need to be a visionary now? Thinking about the new hospital, new medical care for the 21st century. Okay? We no longer can have that laissez-faire approach to our care. It has to be strategic. And we have to be able to help our folks, our buddies, our coworkers in that transformational mindset and coach them along so that we can have a team approach. But then while all of this is going on, to be able to understand that we are serving a wide community of people, and it's going to take a charismatic approach to share the vision. And that's going to come all the way from the staff therapist to the shift leader, the lead therapist, the supervisors, the assistant directors, the directors, the AVPs, the VPs, the CNOs, the COOs, the CFOs, the CEO, and everybody has somebody that they report to. And then the board is the ultimate. So we need to be thinking about those leadership for you guys. And they're called the 5 R's. Level 1 rights. People are going to follow you because they have to if you're a level 1 leader. Level 2, relationships. People follow you because they want to follow you. Level 3, people follow you because of what you do for the organization. They respect you. Okay? Level 4, leaders, people development. People will follow you because of what you've done for them. You're willing to get out there. You're willing to do it. You're fighting for them, and you do it in an honorable, ethical, honest way. And then level 5 is that pinnacle. That's what we want. People follow you because of who you are and what you represent. That's important. That's integrity. That's leadership. And I've been a big proponent of doing that my whole life. Let me get out there doing it. That's why when you see, even my own little small little way, I make discussion posts. I try to make sure I'm reading every paper and putting comments on everything that you do. And then if I'm elated, I'm sending you emails just to get back, because what you do is important. And how great would it be if everybody who were working in your department felt the same way? And books that I've loved a lot of different books on leadership, but one of them was the 5 Levels of Leadership. Here are a bunch of books on leadership, books that I've read. Okay, Becoming a Servant Leader was one of my favorites. This one I remember reading as a director. I remember reading this one here, Fish, because boosting morale in your department, it's so important. Management techniques, for the military. You guys are in a war zone. So if you want to be a leader, you got to think like a leader. And so you got to fill your head. Leadership is not about people doing what you want them to do because you are the leader. It's because you understand your role. And being a servant leader, and these are the 10 qualities of a servant leader. A leader listens. They try to help heal. They empathize with their staff members. They're thinking, they're conceptualizing what's going on. They're aware of themselves. They're aware of those around them. They're able to persuade others in positive ways to help build a community, to build their department, to make their department better, to strive for success, for quality care, for great patient outcomes. They're committed to the growth of their employees. That's what this BSRT program is. That's why I'm so freaking proud of you guys. Because you're pushing yourself. These classes are not just classes to put 4 more little letters after your name. It's about building quality, building a concept. It's a building a concept of how we develop and work in respiratory. I loved one of the things from in the past, Rob Colonis, who's the CEO, was the CEO of McLeod Health. 2 things. One was a culture of no blame. He believed that we learned from our mistakes, and people were frightened to come forward about their mistakes. And then the other thing was this servant leader. We're not the top dog. If you're a VP, if you're a director, your folks shouldn't look at you like, oh my God, I'm frightened of them. No, you're in a servant position. You're serving those who you lead, and you're serving those who you are following. And to be a great leader, you've got to be a great follower. You got to learn to be a follower in the right things. You have to be a visionary, foresight, and stewardship. You've got to handle the resources that are yours, that have been put under your protection, in a proper way. Traditional leadership comes from the top down, leader, management, employees, customers, and there's the value stream at the beginning. That's a command and control. The servant leader is at the bottom, serving management, who serves their employees, who serves their customers. That's a servant. That's all about support and development. One of my favorite pastors talks about servanthood does not nullify leadership, it defines it. And Jesus, and whether or not, great quote, I personally believe that Jesus does not cease to be the Lion of Judah. He becomes the Lamb-like servant of the church. He goes out there and he does what he needs to do for his people, the people he loves. That's what a leader does. And that's what you guys are doing when you're out there. Your final course project. I know I would come down to the final bit. The final course project. You're going to be doing these objectives. I'm going to go through them in a minute, but right here, when you click on it, you can see it's a hyperlink. I talk through the whole project for you. I'm going to make this PowerPoint available to you, and also it'll be out there it'll be on news and announcements. It'll be out there next Monday. And then, of course, the final 7.5 will start the following Monday. And your summative project, you're going to utilize quantitative and qualitative research to research a disaster preparedness. You're going to identify the demands of the event concerning a specific community, a pulmonary community. You assess, evaluate, and develop the emergency plan for that community for a cardiopulmonary type patient now. Okay, what are the needs of the disaster plan? What are the key elements of that plan? And then you want to relate that disaster event to the emotional impact on your staff and on the community. In this one, you're going to need 4 or 5 resources. And like I said, there is the final video. It'll click. I promise you it'll work because it's through my YouTube channel. Okay. And then the last thing here's an example of the abstract for the final summative project. I'm not going to read it because I'm running out of time, but it talks about what's necessary and it relates back to the activity questions. Your abstract should be answering, saying what the paper's about and telling the reader, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. And that's what you all have been doing. And then your conclusion should be, what did you learn from answering those activity questions? And lastly, a big proponent, I mean, I really love thinking about, I love sports, I love the military. A true leader has the confidence to stand alone, do the right thing, the courage to make the tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He does not set out to be a leader, but becomes one by the equality of his actions and the integrity of his intent. Douglas MacArthur. You are our future leaders, guys. Lead by example. Read, learn, share, and when you don't know, research. I'm very proud of you of what you've done. I'm available by text message, by phone. For those who are unable to be here today to watch, I ask you to watch the video, answer some of the questions. My goal is to help you prepare for the final course project, which is in this video, in this PowerPoint, and that video will be there for you, but you're bringing it all together. And I want you to also think about your capstone topic and relate this assignment to whatever that chosen topic. If you need to adjust and massage and change a little bit your topic, that's okay. We can work together. One last thing is tomorrow at 10 o'clock, I'm doing a writing paper, activity paper kind of workshop through Teams. I don't think most of y'all, anybody really, but if anybody would like to come to that, just send me a text or an email. And it's at 10 o'clock. I'm going to record it, but I'm going to walk through the steps, helping the new group of RES 310 students how to do the paper, because I don't want it to be about the technical stuff. I want it to be about the content. And then the last question I'm going to say to y'all as leaders, how would this, if all of your staff members were able to be part of and to really internalize the concept of being a leader and learning how to be a good follower and learning to critically think and using some of the things that we talked about in this PowerPoint, how would that benefit your respiratory department? That's why we believe the BSRT credentials are important. And that's why we believe our BSRT program is one of the best, because we know the therapists that are working in our community. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Available pretty much 24/7. And I hope forward to looking and reading and discussing things with you in Wolf Den. Nobody has any questions? Or if anybody has any questions, you can hang out to the end. But thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you in Wolf Den.
Thank you.